Another year has gone by and you're still on greetings, and frankly, those are barely passable. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and before you know it, you've learned nothing. If you're serious about learning Shona, you need a plan, and you need a system to turn that plan into reality. Pachipangwe, the perfect plan covers 3 things: why, what, and how. The why deals with our goals, the reason we are learning Shona, and what will likely be your motivation when you don't feel like learning. The what are the tasks and activities that will get you to your why. And the how is the system we will use to make sure you reach your goals. Most people quit learning a language, not because they find it hard, but because they actually just forget why they're learning the language in the first place. They lose motivation. We're going to stop that in its tracks today by making sure that your why is always front and center. You're learning Shona for a reason. Do you want to talk to a friend or a loved one? Are you planning to visit Zimbabwe or move to Zimbabwe? Are you planning to teach in the language or to just speak? All of these, or whatever you have written down, is your main vision, your main why as to why you want to learn Shona. Now, let's use your why to inform your what and your how. Make 3 columns on your page. To customize the plan specific to your circumstances, you first need to do a time audit. Here you're going through your calendar or your diary and you're checking, how much time do I have that I can possibly put to my Shona learning? I went through my calendar and I found that I've got about 1 hour every day in the mornings. I've got about half an hour at lunch that I can use towards Shona learning. In the evenings, I've about an hour or half an hour every other day or so. And then for the weekends, I think I can probably squeeze in 2 hours of work. This gives me a grand total of 12 hours per week that I can use towards my language learning. If you know yourself and you know you're definitely not going to be able to put in all that time, reduce it to what is more reasonable for you. The next part you're going to be asking yourself is, how much am I willing to financially invest? What resources are you willing to pay for? If my goal is to talk to Ambuya or just speak casually with my friends, I might not need to invest any money at all. But if my goal, for instance, is to teach in Shona, then it might be a very good idea for me to pay for a tutor or a teacher to make sure that my learning progress is accelerated. At this point in time, I'm telling myself, I'm willing to spend about $20. The $20 will likely not get me a teacher, but it's probably good enough to get me a textbook and vocab resources to get me started. Now that I have a good sense of what I'm willing to invest, I now need to figure out where I should be investing my money and where I should be investing my time. How do I know that? This is where the what comes into play. There are 6 focus areas we're going to be talking about in order to make sure your Shona learning is going as planned. When learning a language, you're trying to gain 2 major skills: listening and speaking. The first focus area is listening. If you actually study the sound system of any language well at the beginning, your pronunciation can be brilliant. That's how I learn my languages. Anything that I am studying, I make sure that when I hear it, I try and reproduce it exactly as it is being said, but also learn the sound system as much as possible so that I have a good mental model that will help me reproduce those sounds. In order to help your listening, make sure you do the pronunciation course so that you will never mishear or mispronounce a Shona sound. The second focus area is speaking. I encourage you to start making the sounds early on, even if you're not getting it 100%. Only if you're making the sounds and making the mistakes do you actually end up speaking fluently. When you are too scared to make mistakes, you will not learn. So allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to be wrong and tell yourself, I will be wrong at first, and that is okay. Only then will you overcome your learning fears and get to fluency. As you are learning, shadow what people say. So you listen to something, you hear it, say it out loud. And as you shadow, your own speaking and pronunciation gets better. Practice saying it out loud so that your body begins to understand, oh, this is how this word sounds like. This is how this word feels. Because the more and more your body gets used to how the sounds and the words feel in your mouth, in your face, you can produce them easier, quicker, faster, and on demand. After listening, the next biggest way to get Shona input in is reading, which is our third focus area. Reading Shona is pretty simple. It's very phonetic, so you can begin to read even before you understand what you are reading. Do that anyway. It means that your brain begins to also say, hey, this is supposed to make some sense. And slowly but surely, you will see the patterns faster. So when you are listening, you might not be able to see those patterns, but when you read, the patterns jump out a lot more clearer. So reading is your friend. You can combine listening and reading to help you 2x, 3x, 4x your input skills, because your brain begins to make a connection of the words you see with the sounds you hear, and the meaning grows that much faster. So if you get a story that is written in Shona, try and also find the audio for it. I know Shona audiobooks are not that many, but we're doing our best to create all of this content in the Shonaverse. The fourth focus area is writing, which is crucial because it reinforces vocabulary, grammar, and sentence structure and helps you to internalize the language. It also encourages creativity and critical thinking, which allows you to express your ideas clearly and coherently. Regular writing practice like journaling and writing exercises will improve your communication skills and build confidence so that you can use your Shona effectively. The fifth focus area is grammar. Grammar tends to have a bad rep for some reason. But the truth of the matter is, grammar is all the building blocks. Understanding grammar enhances your confidence and reduces the hesitance that comes when speaking a new language. And the last key focus area is testing. The truth is, if you don't test yourself, be it in a real life situation, talking to somebody, or with a quiz, anything that forces active recall, you will not get better. Your passive knowledge will increase, but you will also forget it pretty fast. You need to actively test yourself and drill yourself and test yourself even more in order to get better. Now that we know that these are our key focus areas to get us to learn, how do we make a plan where we encompass all of this? As a beginner, I would advise to spend 60 to 80% of the time that you want to invest towards input focus areas: listening, reading, and grammar. Speaking, writing, and testing are output. And then over time, rebalance that until it's 50-50. All of my money, I'm going to put 100% of that towards a grammar book. Of my 12 hours, I'm going to spend 3 hours for grammar, 3 hours for reading, 3 hours for listening. That's 75 to 80% of my time. And then I will spend 30 minutes writing, an hour speaking, and an hour, 30 minutes for testing. Now that I have a good sense of the time that I'm going to be allocating, I'm also going to ask myself, what resources am I going to be using for all of these focus areas? Vocabulary falls in all of the spaces. I'm going to write it here so that we don't forget it and know that it's super important. For my vocabulary, I use Anki. You can use any other space repetition or flashcards that help you, but I use Anki for all of my vocabulary storage, learning, so that I can actually make sure that they're on hand and I can learn them. When I know where my vocabulary is going, I might want to find out where can I get source vocabulary. This is where I would go onto the internet and look for either pre-prepared Anki decks or word lists that are great for beginners or whatever my level is. So that's vocabulary sorted. After vocabulary, especially if you are not investing in a teacher, you need some sort of dictionary or translation resource. There are very few Shona dictionaries online. There's one called Shona, which is okay. And if you can find yourself a Dura Mazwi, which basically means dictionary in Shona, here's one by D. Dale. There's another one by Herbert Chimundu. And if you're into science, there's another one by Professor C.J. Chetanga. If you don't have access to these, the Shonaverse also has a Dura Mazwi in development. The link is in the description below. Click on that and help us develop it to be the best Dura Mazwi online. So, vocabulary, Anki. Translation, find yourself a Lura Mazwi that works. For testing, I advise you to use Anki to test yourself because you're very rarely going to be able to find a ton of tests online. You can also test yourself by creating your own quiz questions, or if you have a textbook, using the questions at the end of every chapter to learn. For grammar, get yourself a Shona textbook. This is the one that I currently recommend for most of my students. It's the Beginner's Shona Chishona by Aquilina Mawadza. There is a newer edition out, so you can check that one out as it also has audio. If you're in Zimbabwe, you will have more options, so grab any one of those. For writing, all you need is a journal. And writing prompts are easy enough to come by. For reading, online is your best friend. Look for any source material that you can find that is written in Shona, whether it be Shona News or Shona Stories, Shona Nganu, anything that you can come by. For speaking, find a partner, find a friend, or shadow speak if you can't find somebody to speak to. And for listening, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify. Those are the main places you're going to be able to find some good Shona media, find Shona content creators and follow them, and you'll be able to get a ton of listening that way. Now that you have a good idea of your what and how much time you're going to be spending for each section, the next thing you're going to be doing is breaking down your why. It's great to have a nice visionary why like this, but this is not going to help you learn in the short space of time. If I know that I want to talk to Ambuya, I need to put a timeline towards that. I want to be able to talk to her by the end of March. Of this big goal that I have, what is doable in the near future? I like to break down my goals into two, my 1 month goal and my 3 month goal. Those are good times for you to recheck and make sure you're actually still going towards that. It says January, I'm going to be asking myself, what am I planning to be able to do by the end of March? So if it's talking to Ambuya, I want to be able to make sure that I can get all of my greetings and ask her just generally about life, how she is doing. So let's write that down. Okay. And I'm going to put my timeline. This is 1 month. My 3 month goal might be something along the lines of, I want to be able to speak to her for a good solid 15 minutes. Now that I've broken down my goal, I can then use my time allocations and figure out where best to place them. So you need to do that. Pick up whichever goal it is. If it is to visit Zimbabwe, then you're asking yourself, if my visit is at the end of June, about 6 months away, what is a good 1 month goal? What is a good 3 month goal? Put those down. Now that you have your shorter term goals, we don't want to just make a generic plan. We want to make a customized plan that suits you and your life. In order to do that, we're going back to our third column, the how. And here we're going to talk about the second part of our system that is super important, immersion. If you're lucky enough to be in Zimbabwe or where Shona is spoken, you can immerse yourself easily by making sure that you're in context, real life contexts and situations where people are speaking and using Shona for their day-to-day lives. If on the other hand, you're not in those places, you can still simulate immersion. We simulate these immersive contexts in order to solidify our learning. How can you simulate immersion where you are? By surrounding yourself with Shona music, Shona media, be it podcasts, be it YouTube, by surrounding yourself with people who are also trying to learn Shona. So you're basically asking yourself, whatever I do in my day-to-day living, can I Shonify that? Can I turn that into Shona one way or another? Can I get my news in Shona? Can I journal in Shona? Can I try to think in Shona, regardless of wherever I am? There's an advantage to simulating immersion. When you simulate immersion, you're using Shona in your context where you need it. And as a result, you begin to learn the words that you interface with the most. The Shonaverse is there to help you. Make sure to join the spaces and talk to people to get ideas. Now we need to go to our calendar and put in all of our learning time. I'm going to put my week across. Because I have a good sense that for me, there's the morning session, there's my afternoon session, and my evening session. I've split it up into those areas. So you know when you have your time chunks, I have a morning time chunk of about an hour, afternoon time chunks of about 30 minutes, and evening time chunks between 30 minutes and an hour. So I'm going to take a look and I know that I need to make sure that no matter what, I'm doing the hard stuff first. eat the frog first. The stuff that you are likely to put off, that needs to happen. So because I know that I need to get 3 hours of my grammar learning in, I'm going to put those in when I know that no matter what, it's going to get done. So if I leave it to the evening, which I know that those are sometimes happening sessions, sometimes not, depending on how busy I am, then they're likely not to happen. But my morning session is a time that I know I can actually set aside. Then I'm like, all my grammar sessions are in the morning. So I have 3 hours of that, and I know that I've got about an hour. So I'm going to spread those out. So Monday is a grammar session, Wednesday is another grammar session, and Friday is another grammar session. So I've got my 3 hours of grammar sorted. And then I'm going to be looking at the next thing that I need to make sure that I have, which is my reading. So I'm going to put those, and actually, you know what? I'm going to break those out because I like to put that. So I'm going to put them there. This is my reading session, 2 reading session, and I need to find some time over the weekend at some point to have a reading session. And that's okay. I'll put it on a Friday, Saturday morning. So that's cool. So those 3 hours sorted. Then I now need to find 3 hours of listening. Remember how we said to immerse yourself and to make sure that you're focused? So my immersion for listening is easy in the afternoons because the half an hour that I've got in the afternoons is usually my post-lunch walk. So if I am walking, it's so chill. I can listen a lot at that time. So that means that I can use all of my half hours on the during the walk and make that happen. So I'm going to put in my listening, and that will give me 2.5 hours. I can find another 30 minutes on a Sunday or something like that to make sure that I've got my listening in. So that covers my 3 hours of listening. Now I need to find 1 speaking hour and 30 minutes for journaling and some testing. I like to make sure that I test myself at the beginning of the week. So I'm actually going to make my testing happen on Monday evenings. So I'm going to put myself an hour there. And I'm also looking at it and I'm like, I actually will be doing a little bit of Anki every single day. So if I spend about 10 minutes doing vocab testing on every single day, I will actually have my testing sorted out. So that's me doing a tiny bit of Anki every single day, because all testing is making sure that I'm forcing myself to recall and see what's there. So I'll do 1 formalish test on a Monday evening, and the other times I will use my Anki. That sorts out my 1.5 hours there. And then I'm going to be looking at it and I'm like, I'm now just left with my 30 minutes of journaling, and I'll put that in my weekend because I know that I've got time there. And I'm like, which day is best? Probably on the Saturday or maybe even the Sunday. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to make sure that I've got some writing that happens over the weekend on one of those 2 days, as well as my speaking practice. And this for me is when I'll actively look for somebody who's going to be speaking with me. So I'll try and make sure that maybe on a Sunday, I put in my last hour for speaking. And that covers my 12 hours that I said I'm going to be investing in my language learning. So now what I need to do is just prettify that and make sure I'm putting all the information that I need. So what is the part of your system that makes sure that this does not fall apart? You need, on one day, whatever day you know is best suited for you, where you retrospectively look at your learning. So for me, the day that works best for that is my Monday when I'm doing my testing. Soon after my testing, I know I'm going to give myself a half an hour for retrospecting. And all I'm doing in that half an hour is I'm asking myself, how did last week go? And what do I need to change? For instance, if I said I was going to do some listening every single time when I'm walking, but where I live, it rains quite a lot. And if I have not listened because I did not take that walk and I did not make it up, then I need to be changing that and saying that's not friction free, that's not easy, it's not seamlessly meshing into my life. So I need to change that up and do something different. So when can I make sure that I have my listening? So maybe let me make sure that it's now when I'm exercising. When do I do my exercise? Then I put it there and I shift that around. If I'm realizing that I'm not managing to put in my Anki testing every single evening, do I need to change that to a different time that is more suitable? Should I do my Anki testing when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning instead? Every single week, on your review day, you're taking a look and you're saying what worked and what didn't work. Whatever worked, we're keeping it. Don't change it. It's not broken. What did not work, that's where you have to experiment slightly differently to make sure that it's there. Remember, always schedule in the harder stuff first, which is usually the grammar stuff. Make sure that is in. And then all the other stuff is your fun stuff that you're going to be able to put in anyway. So you're looking at this and you're like, how do I make that happen? For me, the grammar stuff is textbook. So I know I'm going to be using my textbook all the time. But my listening could be a mini drama, or it could be a Spotify, or it could be songs. So that's a lot of my fun stuff. Same with my reading. My reading could be some graphical novels or comics, or it can be reading subtitles on a drama that I'm watching. So that also can be quite fun. So make sure that you're interspacing the hard stuff with fun stuff so that you keep yourself motivated. On your fourth check-in, which is after a month, you're asking yourself how well you've gotten towards that particular goal. And if that's great, you change it up. You go back to your 3-month goal and ask yourself, okay, I can now ask how she is and make sure all my greetings are good. In a 15-minute conversation with my grandma, what are the usual topics we talk about? We usually talk about my cousins. We usually talk about her farm and how her crops are going. So let me find all the vocabulary for farming and crops and learn those. So I'm going to make sure that all of my learning is actually targeted towards my particular goal. So if you're wanting to learn how to knit in Shona, something that you enjoy, then you know that you're going to be looking for vocabulary that is targeted towards knitting. Then you go back and you make sure that you put it in. Your grammar lesson sometimes might not necessarily match with your goals. If you're using a textbook, they will start with greetings, then they will go to maybe colors, and then they will go to numbers. That is okay. The whole point is you're learning from different angles and different facets of the language, and you're getting better as you go. Remember, your system is what is going to make this work. The first part of your system is making sure you understand how much you're willing to invest, whether it be time or money. If you have more money that you can invest, for instance, then any one of these hours might actually be a lesson with your tutor or your teacher. The second part of the system is to immerse. To immerse means that you are taking a look at your life and you're fitting in your Shona learning with everything you already do. So brushing my teeth, listening to the news, taking a walk, going for a run, fit it into your life so that you don't have to go out of your way in order to do it. Reduce friction. Find ways to drop in Shona learning where possible so that things are easy and not difficult. And then lastly, it's reviewing and retrospecting so that you can adapt the system. That is taking at least 30 minutes ever so often to ask yourself, how did I go last week? What do I need to change? What failed and why? What worked and why? Did I meet my goal? And then changing your plan after that retrospect to make it better for you every single week. It might take 2 or 3 iterations until you find a plan that just works. But remember, if you are managing to stick to your plan 80% of the time, that's a good thing. 100% of the time can sometimes end up being too perfectionist and make things difficult. Make sure you're sticking to your plan 80% of the time. That way you are getting consistency. Let's take a look at our example plans. So I have 4 plans and you can pick one as is and use it, or you can customize them to suit you and your environment and your learning goals. Consistency is key, regardless of what else you do. Maybe you've decided that you're going to do the 2-hour-a-day plan. But does that mean you're doing 2 hours 7 days a week? Maybe you're taking weekends off. Or maybe you're just not feeling that well. I would just say that no matter what, as long as you are consistent with whatever schedule you decide, if you're deciding I'm only going to be a weekend warrior and I study 4 hours over the weekend, that's you. But it will also reflect your progress because there's a lot more to be forgotten over the days. So I would, rather than doing 4 hours on a Saturday in one go, try and break that up maybe to 10 minutes every single day within a 3 hour chunk on a Saturday. That way, the forgetting will be less and you will make better progress. So if you only have 10 or 15 minutes a day for your Shona learning, I would actually pick one pillar to do a day. And whatever pillar you pick, you're reinforcing what you've learned previously. On the first day, I'll focus on some listening. I will listen to a podcast, or maybe I'll listen to a children's show and just have fun with that. Then tomorrow, I'll figure out what's the vocabulary in this and actually sit down and write out all that vocabulary. Then on the third day, I will focus on drilling that vocabulary and testing myself to make sure that I've understood it. Then on the fourth day, I will speak that vocabulary, make small sentences or phrases with that vocabulary. And on the last day of the week, maybe combine all of those and make sure that that part is cemented. You will make great progress because that chunk will not be forgotten. You've reinforced it over and over again in the space of a week. So your 10 to 15 minutes have been super productive. Here's an example of how you can spend 10 to 15 minutes to make sure that you're getting somewhere. If you do this, and maybe you're focusing on between 5 to 10 words a day, by the end of 6 months, you will have at least 400 words, phrases, and good sentences you can use by just spending 10 to 15 minutes a day on your Shona learning. On the other hand, if you have a bit more time, and you're saying, I can do 30 minutes a day. Double the time means double the learning. If I were you, I would make sure that I've got my vocabulary and grammar on the first day so I understand what it is that I'm planning on learning. And then on the second day, focus on listening on those words and the grammar points to reinforce what I have learned on the first day. On the third day, I'm doing exercises and speaking, reinforcing every single thing. And then use what I've learned on the fourth or fifth day to write a journal so that again, that repetition, that active recall that I'm forcing myself to do will cement the learning. Here's what a 30-minute plan could look like. There's some lighter days and there's some heavier days. If you're a person who's like, I will learn Monday to Friday and take the weekends off, that's great. You can do that. But I would still say try and do even just 5 to 10 minutes of vocabulary over the weekends, because the more vocabulary you know, the better off you're going to be. There's nothing worse than understanding a grammar point, but not knowing how to practice it. And you can only practice it when you have more words in your arsenal. So make sure you've got those words down. And you can only get words in by learning them one by one and drilling them on a day-to-day basis. Anki is your friend. Flashcards are your friend. So get to using them so that you learn all your words that you need to learn. Now, if you're doing an hour to 2 hours of learning Shona a day, you can do all of the pillars in a single day. You can figure out what your weak points are and spend a little bit more time there. You can deep dive into structures and you can practice a lot more in order to cement your learning. In the 1 to 2 hour zone, the world's your oyster. Create a structure that suits you best. Here are 2 example plans that you can customize to suit you best. That's it for now. I will see you in the next class where we're going to be talking about noun classes. Noun classes tend to be something tricky for a lot of people when learning Shona. Let's demystify them in the next class. Tonan!